Note: this is a video that is solely dedicated to discussing, analysing, and debunking the Tangiwai movie train crash scene. For a video about the full disaster, see the description for said video. This video is meant to have comedic tones, but there are still undertones that some may find distressing. So, back in 2011, a film was in the talks about the Tangiwai disaster, because that was just the craze during the 2000s and 2010s of insert love story on insert disaster. You know the type, the Gustav, Hindenburg, Britannic, Pompeii, you know those types of films, trying to capitalise on Titanic's success, which they never were able to. Now, when Tangiwai was in production, they decided to focus on the story of Narissa Love and how she would die along with 150 other people on the night of December 24th, 1953. And that was probably done because they had a romance subplot going on in the background. Because of course it did. I mean, yeah, historically that was the case, like they were going to get married if the disaster had not happened, but let's not worry about that right now. With a budget of just $3 million, going about filming the set-piece train crash was going to have to be shoestring at best. Exterior shots were done using real locomotives and carriages, while the disaster itself used 1:6 scale locomotives at the correct scale speed of 40 miles per hour. Now, while the rest of the movie I cannot determine the historical accuracy for, except for this one bit of IMDb trivia about incorrect license plates, which, whoops, I can instead debunk how the crash scene unfolds in this movie and how the filmmakers got it mostly wrong. Also, a side note, this film opens with a thing stating that there were 267 people on board the train that night. No, that is just incorrect. It is stated everywhere that there were 285 people on board, or did the filmmakers remove 18 people to balance the ratios, or were they just not interesting enough to feature? So, to start the train action, we see a train during the night in an establishing shot, and this scene will look familiar as they use the same shot 2 other times, later when the train is travelling and when Alice goes for a green screen dive. Yeah, that's basically the exact same clip. We then see the train pass through the King Country area of New Zealand, where we see the wise Maori woman looking down disdainfully. Somehow I feel like there's a theme that they're gonna go for this movie, but let's not get into the politics just yet. In the middle of the movie, we see Narissa basically say, "Nah, I'm marrying Bob, see ya mother, go away," and then just leave for Auckland, where we then see her go through Wellington Station, and they did dress it up to be accurate to what it would have looked like during the 50s, although to be fair, if you go there today it basically looks the exact same, just minus the ticketing stand. But then we see the guard, Tokiawa, recognise Narissa because they interacted earlier in the movie, and then straight up just upgrade her second class ticket to first class. He then finds her a seat on this Christmas Eve train in first class, which is straight up odd because she did have a first class ticket in real life. You basically just made this scene just so you could pass the Bechdel test. Later in the scene and across the movie, we see here Narissa and some other passengers in an NZR carriage accurately set to be AA 1717. But, with every positive comes a negative. The guard for this express, Tokiawa. I alluded to this a little bit just before, but let's discuss this. I can't find any historical date for when Maori people were allowed jobs like these by 1953, and considering NZ politics at the time, that likely wouldn't have changed for at least 30 years, but again, the specific date is unknown. It's perfectly great that he has this job, but there is a problem that I will discuss a bit later. Also, a quick aside, he's the guard, yet he doesn't blow the whistle, and then does this hand gesture for the train to proceed. The hand gesture is likely accurate, because I've seen many different heritage railways in New Zealand do different things, but then we see him use a whistle later at Taihape. So unless this movie is seriously suggesting that Wellington has a designated whistleblower, which would cause scenes like this so often, I really have no clue. But let's get back to Tokiawa. The guard on the express that night was William Inglis. And I'm no expert here, but they don't exactly look alike. What they've basically done here is like casting an American as a Mongolian... it's like casting an American as an African-American man who's actually an Australian. Oh, come on. Alright, let's try this again. Getting a Scotsman to play an Egyptian... Oh, no, okay, this isn't even funny anymore. Final try. This is like getting an Englishman to play an Indian. Well, that's just great. I'll give this one a pass. That movie is actually really good. I understand what they were going for having Tokiawa as a character, but maybe having him be an assistant guard would have been more better suited. Still with William Inglis in the movie, because William Inglis won a medal that night. You could have at least had him somehow. Although, in saying, this was probably done to give symbolism for casual racism, as we later see in the evening at Taihape for the crew change, which is an issue right off the bat. The crew change would have likely have taken place between 8 PM to 9 PM, which in New Zealand is when the sun is still up. The image you see on screen was taken at 9:40. So yeah, pitch black at 9 is complete BS. We then also see in this scene one of the engine crews say,
"Yeah, don't tell me I got you on board. Have you got a home to go to?"
and then go on to say,
Hey, get out of it.
wow, okay, that's a bit suspicious. We know he's gonna die in about 5 minutes, but throwing in a racism subplot and trying to run divine intervention? I'm not so sure about that, Chief. That doesn't exactly seem great for this historical movie. Note, this is not defending racism at all. There is no place for racism anywhere. This is just more questioning about how you could effectively desecrate people's memories. Because, let's just say hypothetically, this movie had been more successful and widespread, which, as judged by the YouTube views on many clips, people at least know about this movie, but probably not the rest of it. This could have potentially turned into a Titanic and William Murdoch situation. Because, quick side tangent, that story is insane on how much hate James Cameron got for that one scene. Because they said that, he would never have done that night. It was likely Moody, the 6th officer. At least I believe it was the 6th officer. You know, there were 2 people with guns that night. Let's just not get into that. That's for a later discussion. Maybe for a future video. But genuinely, back to Tokigawa and, the whole kind of casual racism thing. Just don't do this. I can understand what you're going for, but maybe not in a movie that's meant to be historically accurate, because you could accidentally put the thought into people's minds that this guy was, bad and deserved to die. There are people that do definitely deserve to die, but engine crews for New Zealand Railways, I don't think exactly are on the top of the list, if you get what I'm trying to say here. You know, Tokigawa, you could still have him, but if you have to create characters that replace other characters, that doesn't exactly work. That's hypothetically replacing Captain Smith from Titanic with Kate Winslet, making Kate Winslet be the captain. That does not work. Okay? Maybe they should have just done a bit of a rewrite for this. Let's get back to some positivity then, after that quick side tangent. We see KA942 having been done up with nameplates to become KA949, and they even got the postal van behind the guard's van correct, in this establishing shot. Although it should be noted that the difference between 949 and the model is very noticeable, because the model is quite sooty, while 949 in the establishing shots is quite shiny. Interestingly, I actually like the model more, because it is more accurate to what it would have been, because the 1950s general NZ landscape, if you just look at these images on screen, they definitely, yeah, it's a good thing we found out about black paint rather than just coal dust. Alright, back to the train. We're given a running commentary, as throughout the thing, with Tokigawa giving updates periodically about the cricket game that Bob Blair is playing in at this very moment. But New Zealand in those times barely had television, and radios were a new technology, so I highly doubt that there was a radio aboard the train that was strong enough to not require changing frequencies as the express made its way across New Zealand, or how just even being able to receive radio signals end of. We see just before the disaster a character related to Tokigawa sitting in her house looking up at Mount Ruapehu as she hears the beginnings of what would become the Laha. This is neither a debunk or confirmation, just a statement from another perspective to see how the disaster unfolds, which I give a pass in this scenario. You can create characters to view the thing so long as they don't interact and change events. Now, we get back to the Tangiwai disaster itself. We see Cyril Ellis come to the road bridge, and this is indeed accurate about how he was driving with his mother-in-law and wife before coming to the swamped bridge. However, we then come to the main reason I wanted to make this video, the bridge collapse and subsequent scenes. We see here how the Laha reaches the bridge, knocks out a pier of the bridge, removing a span, but then the pier kind of moves right back into place, almost as if the scene, the pier was done with polystyrene, but let's not worry about that right now. All the evidence, even the Board of Inquiry, even Elsa's own testimony, said that there were rails. Yes, the pier would have been knocked out, but fundamentally the bridge you still could have passed over. So why they did this, I have no clue. We then see a light appear at least 800 meters away, so Alice grabs a torch and manages to run 200 meters or so, scale 2 fences, and run down the tracks for at least 10 seconds before doing a green screen dive. That just breaks my brain a little bit. Like, I gave him the benefit of the doubt in the disaster video, but this is just ludicrous. If the express was visible up to about a kilometer away, he would have had to have sprinted at least 45 kilometers an hour to undertake this. You try run 200 meters right now, and trust me, the math does not work. Unless, of course, the fences were like a foot high and he just was a very good track and field athlete, but we don't know about that, so let's just pass that. Also, small nitpick, but the tracks are basically dead straight in real life, yet we see the train round a corner as the train approaches Alice. But how did Alice see the headlight if it was basically facing north if the truck is facing away from it, facing west? We may have to consider Alice to be the next Lisan al-Gaib. Okay, there was a small bit here that I actually like. We see one of the engine crews look out the cab window ahead on the line, where there is literally no trees, bridges, or anything at all. Although we then see the same crewman look over to the right, see the raging Lahar, which was likely the main cause of the emergency brake application and not Alice's warning. But when they do see the Lahar, we see the fireman jam on the brakes and turn off the oil valves, which likely prevented a boiler explosion when the disaster happened. We then come to the disaster itself. We see the train fly over the gap, which really should not have been here at this current moment, and the carriage is falling as well. While it's not clear because the camera keeps cutting, I do count 5 carriages following the engine, with the 6th carriage stopping at a 45-degree angle. This is accurate. Even though the carriages don't exactly follow where they would have ended up, like, all of them kind of just followed the train. Like, there are a few of them that went off to the left, went off to the right, some that went flying far down the riverbank, one of them went about 1.5 miles downriver, but let's get to the discussion. See, I can look past this with the carriages because at the relative scale you're working at, it's really hard for you to fundamentally get the carriages to go where you want them to go unless you want to use fishing wire, which, as from previous movies, doesn't look the greatest. We then see Alice and Tokigawa, who really should be English in this scenario, enter the back of the carriage and try to evacuate everyone within, before the carriage then falls into the Lahar. This is all accurate, and tragically we do see the death of Narissa Love in this scene. Although her having been carried into the morgue so dramatically by Tokigawa was a bit much. We also see him find her outside of the carriage, despite her body having been found in real life trapped under a seat, tragically under some falling luggage, as based upon some testimonies. Going back to the disaster scene, seeing the water level falling so dramatically is again accurate, as well as the passengers being covered in oil and sooty water. Although the final positions of the carriages depicted here is a bit inaccurate, like we can't even see the engine, and it should have been resting right there. Yeah, like, these two scenes definitely don't look alike, they didn't look at the images. We then possibly see a recreation of the scene where rescuers found a woman believed dead on the riverbank, only for her to wake up. Although this river looks remarkably clean and with a lot of trees, considering that effectively a tsunami just ran through it. For context, this is what it looked like the next day after the disaster. Yeah, I think that the movie might be suggesting the Lahar was just a trickle, despite the fact that it broke the bridge, but let's just not talk about that consistency error, because we'd be here all day. Like, fundamentally, at least for this scene, they could have just gone to any of the stone rivers that are barren across New Zealand, like here, or hell, even here, you know, like, that's a lot of open space to the side there. You still could have got away with that by, just green screening in the mountain in the background. Alright, let's round up the facts, shall we? We have set dressing and period accurate locales, which I approve of, but then we have improper casting, questionable human feats, then the crash sequence, and finally the aftermath. And honestly, as a whole package, everything discussed in this video gets about like a 6.5 out of 10 in terms of accuracy. They used what was commonly known at the time, although maybe hiring a research consultant could have been wise to ensure full historical accuracy considering the movie you're trying to make. They've tried to make an excuse for this, because at the end of the movie, I saw in the credits, they say a thing that says, events of the story may be fictitious. Well, that's plain to see. Even just reading Wikipedia or watching a documentary, or hell, even just reading this book could give enough information for the script writers and storyboarders. Although, I will say, as a slight positive for this movie, the acting was still kind of good. Like Alice, like the guy who played Alice, like in the scene when he's trying to stop the train, that is emotion in his voice. Like, that is genuinely a guy that's trying to stop a train, even though he's in front of a green screen. But still, see, that's great. The acting is actually kind of good, but everything else drags it down. Like, as I'm sitting here right now, I'm getting more and more annoyed about this movie. Like, this is my third attempt to record this. I got so mad the previous 2 times. So I'm gonna end this video here. Alright then. So this is a new type of video that I've been wanting to experiment with, so let me know down below if there are any other train historical scenes that need debunking or analysing. I'm potentially thinking about some other scenes of note, but that might have to wait at the moment. I don't know, if you guys have any good ones, throw them down in the comments below. This is TWMallard38 signing off for now. Have a Merry Christmas everyone. I have no idea when the next video will be up, but I will assure it will be up before the end of January. Goodbye.